Somewhere right in your neighborhood, maybe even on your own street, there is a completely dead car battery sitting on a garage floor. Pretty soon, somebody is going to hand over their hard-earned cash just to toss it in a recycling bin. But that battery isn't actually dead at all. If you pour a highly specific yet incredibly cheap liquid inside and hook up a pair of cables, it suddenly churns out enough power to charge up mobile devices, illuminate LED bulbs, and keep survival radios broadcasting for almost a week. That liquid will run you pennies. You already have a supply of it sitting in your kitchen cupboards right now. Let's rewind to 1966. A defense engineer buried deep inside a highly classified naval research division proved that a battery cell activated by simple salt water could maintain a continuous electrical current for well over 72 hours with absolutely zero recharging. They filed the patent in 1967. Fast forward to 1969, and the United States Patent Office officially buried the whole thing beneath a strict secrecy order. They didn't hide it because it posed a public threat. They didn't hide it because it was a flop. They hid it because it performed flawlessly. And you can't put a premium price tag on something practically free. This is the hidden history of the saltwater battery. It is the exact technology that corporate energy giants have spent the last 6 decades ensuring you remain completely blind to. Welcome back to Forbidden Camping. If uncovering the truth matters to you, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. We specialize in unearthing exactly what the big industries try to bury. To grasp exactly how a splash of salt water can resurrect a dead cell, we have to look much further back than the 1960s. We have to look to the ocean. The year is 1839. A Welsh physicist by the name of William Robert Grove is tinkering with electrochemical cells inside his London workspace. He drops a pair of platinum electrodes into a bath of sulfuric acid, hooks them up to a closed circuit, and watches as the reaction generates an uninterrupted flow of electricity. He named it the Grove cell. The academic elites called it a massive breakthrough. Grove had effectively demonstrated that mixing liquid electrolytes with specific metals could pump out continuous power completely on demand forever, provided those base materials were still present. But the truth is, Grove didn't actually discover this phenomenon first. He was merely the first guy to write it down in a European science lab. Long before Grove, generations of Portuguese fishermen were actively utilizing clay pots loaded with seawater and contrasting metal rods to summon a weak, yet incredibly consistent electrical charge. They used this primitive setup to electroplate their fishing hooks, keeping their iron gear from rusting out in the corrosive ocean environment. They didn't label it electrochemistry, they just called it common sense. The sea was their infinite battery, and a couple of metal scraps were the only components they needed. Halfway across the world during Japan's Edo period, coastal metal workers figured out the exact same trick. They realized that clay jars filled with ocean water, coupled with rods of iron and copper, generated enough juice to heat up fine wire for their intricate jewelry designs. We have documentation from Kyoto metal guilds dating back to the early 18th century detailing this precise configuration. They didn't have imported European textbooks or formal physics training. They relied purely on observation, trial and error, and an undeniable realization that the ocean had the power to push electricity through metal. Every single society that lived near the coast and worked with salt water and iron stumbled upon the exact same truth independently. Salt water is conductive. Placing 2 distinct metals into a saltwater bath creates a voltage gap. That voltage gap equates to current, and current equals power. The laws of physics haven't shifted a single inch in 4 centuries. Now let's jump ahead to 1959. Howard Bellinger, a mechanical engineer, is stationed at a government-backed testing site down in San Diego, California. Bellinger isn't out to revolutionize global energy. He is just trying to solve a very narrow, highly critical military dilemma. Deep-sea submarines require fail-safe backup power grids that don't need oxygen to ignite, lack complicated moving parts, and can spring to life in a split second after sitting completely inert. Bellinger starts testing silver chloride and magnesium cells that trigger upon contact with seawater. The underlying idea is incredibly basic. You take 2 metals that have a volatile reaction to one another and keep them perfectly dry and separated. The second ocean water bridges the gap, an electrochemical storm kicks off, and the power starts surging. You don't need to charge it. You don't need to prime it. A lifeless cell transforms into a powerhouse the instant it tastes the sea. By the time 1963 rolled around, Bellinger's group had successfully engineered a saltwater unit capable of pushing out 2.4 volts per cell, sustaining that current for over 4 straight days. String 4 of those cells together, and you're looking at almost 10 volts. That was plenty to fire up emergency transponders, navigation gear, and distress radios from an entirely dead state utilizing nothing more than a scoop of ocean water. The Navy started packing these specialized cells into downed pilot kits, life jackets, and survival buoys all through the 1960s. This wasn't theoretical. The performance metrics were logged. The data was aggressively verified across hundreds of real-world oceanic trials. Then in 1966, a totally different engineer working within that same defense program asked a dangerous question. If we can use seawater to activate military survival gear, what exactly happens if we take a totally depleted standard-issue lead acid battery and flood it with a specialized saltwater electrolyte mixture? The findings of that internal experiment were quietly filed under a generic research reference number. The official patent filing happened in 1967. The government secrecy order dropped like a hammer just 2 years after that. That specific patent number still sits in the United States Patent Office's archive of suppressed applications today. It's out there. You can go search for it right now. It isn't scrubbed from existence. It is simply tucked away inside a dusty folder that the commercial consumer battery sector desperately hopes you never open. Before I go any further, I need to be completely straight with you. What I've just shared is merely the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what the energy sector has intentionally hidden away over the last 6 decades. I've dedicated months to compiling every single blacklisted off-grid power technique, every abandoned battery schematic, and every independent electricity system that massive corporations have carefully scrubbed from the public record. All of it is packed into the comprehensive Forbidden Camping Vault. You'll find the Earth Battery Blueprint, which pulls a continuous charge from just wet soil and 2 pieces of scrap metal. The definitive Saltwater Battery Restoration Manual, featuring the exact metal ratios and electrolyte blends for peak performance. The atmospheric capacitor system, designed to pull ambient electrical voltage straight out of the thin air. The thermoelectric generator schematic that turns any heat source, even a standard campfire, into usable current. The gravity-fed battery model that top engineering firms successfully proved only to immediately lock away. The compressed air storage strategies that veteran off-gridders have relied on for years. These are the emergency power protocols taught by top-tier military survival experts, the kind of gear you will never see advertised in a mainstream camping brochure. Over 10 comprehensive guides, zero fluff, no filler. Every single page is engineered for immediate, practical application. The link is waiting for you in the description right now. But don't click away just yet, because the actual physics driving the saltwater battery is enough to make the modern energy sector sweat. Here is the exact mechanism of why it functions, and why the battery corporations are desperate to convince you it's impossible. A normal automotive battery uses sponge lead plates, lead dioxide plates, and a sulfuric acid bath. As the battery drains, that acid reacts with both sets of plates, converting them into lead sulfate. The acid loses its strength and becomes diluted. The current halts. You assume it's completely dead, but the lead itself hasn't vanished. The plates are still sitting right there. The core electrochemical potential between 2 distinct metals submerged in a conductive fluid hasn't evaporated. Your battery isn't dead. Its electrolyte is just exhausted. Salt water is nature's perfect electrolyte. It's packed with sodium chloride, trace minerals, and dissolved oxygen, all of which heavily promote ionic conductivity. When you introduce a specially mixed saltwater solution to those sulfated lead plates, it kicks off a secondary electrochemical reaction. It's not identical to the original sulfuric acid process, but it is a genuine, measurable, and continuous galvanic reaction. It generates usable power from plates that your standard garage charger claims are totally ruined. Back in 2018, researchers at the University of Sydney released a paper detailing this exact behavior in lead acid units treated with sodium chloride. Batteries that showed absolutely zero usable capacity on standard diagnostic gear suddenly pumped out 30 to 60% of their factory-rated power after receiving a saltwater modification. They monitored this continuously for 45 days, and the cells maintained that modified output the entire time. Similarly, in 2020, the American Chemical Society put out a report on magnesium saltwater cells built entirely from hardware store scraps. One single cell, made of a magnesium strip and a piece of copper wire dunked in a 2% sodium chloride bath, kicked out around 1 volt of steady current. String 10 together, and they held 10 volts for 70 straight hours before any noticeable drop-off occurred. 10 volts for 70 hours from a handful of cheap metal in a bucket of salty water. Then, in 2019, the Journal of Power Sources confirmed that saltwater-activated aluminum air cells match the energy density of commercial lithium batteries, but at a raw material cost of less than $3 per kilowatt hour. $3 per kilowatt hour. Right now, the national average to pull retail electricity from the grid sits around 17 cents per kilowatt hour. Those two economic realities simply cannot coexist in the same business model. One of them had to be erased from the public consciousness. If you've listened this long, you now know more about the realities of electrochemical energy storage than 99% of the drivers on the road. Do me a favor. Hit subscribe and send this to a friend who is still throwing their hard-earned money at recycling centers for batteries with plenty of life left. Every single schematic the power grid elites tried to erase is waiting for you in the vault. The link is down below. Now stick around, because this next part is where the financial motives become glaringly obvious. The worldwide battery industry pulls in over $120 billion a year. That figure is expected to skyrocket to $400 billion by 2030, driven by the massive push for electric cars and grid-level storage. But the entire foundation of that massive empire hinges on one core belief. Batteries are meant to be consumed. They drain down, they die, and you are forced to buy a new one. A $2 saltwater trick that boosts a battery's lifespan by 30 to 60% completely shatters that illusion. It ruins the programmed replacement loop, it destroys retail profit margins, and it severely disrupts the cozy network between manufacturers, auto dealerships, and scrap yards that churn through more than 150 million lead-acid batteries in the US every single year. 150 million batteries averaging about $120 a pop. That is an $18 billion replacement racket resting squarely on top of power cells that a pocket-change saltwater bath could keep running for months or even years. Bearing this didn't take some grand, smoky backroom conspiracy. It just required silence. Zero grant money allocated for saltwater regeneration studies. Zero mention of it in mechanic certification classes. Zero shelf space at your local auto parts store for a tiny bottle of solution that would put everything else on that shelf out of business. The science wasn't aggressively destroyed, it was just drowned out by the deafening roar of commercial marketing. So here is the exact process. Listen closely, because getting the mixture right is critical. Grab a completely dead lead-acid battery, pop off the top cell covers. Inside you'll find 6 separate chambers holding the lead plates. Grab a standard syringe or turkey baster and carefully suck out as much of the dead, old electrolyte fluid as you can, being mindful not to scrape the internal plates. Next, brew up a mixture of pure distilled water and standard non-iodized salt. The ratio is exactly 1 tablespoon of salt for every single cup of water. Do not use iodized salt. The iodine introduces chemical roadblocks that ruin the reaction. That is a non-negotiable step. Pour your new solution into every cell right up to the factory fill line stamped on the plastic casing. Snap the caps back on. Hook the whole thing up to a basic automotive trickle charger, dialed down to its absolute lowest setting, usually around 2 amps. Let it sit there at room temperature for 24 to 48 hours. When that cycle finishes, grab a voltmeter and test it. Cells that were flatlining at absolutely 0 volts prior to this treatment routinely bounce back to between 10.5 and 12 volts. Anything hitting 12 volts or higher is fully capable of cranking a car engine. A guy out in rural Tennessee actually recorded himself doing this to his 2019 F-150. 2 separate auto shops tested the truck's battery and pronounced it completely dead. After a $2 saltwater flush and a 48-hour trickle charge, his voltmeter showed 12.4 volts. He kept driving that same truck on that same dead battery for another 8 straight months before it finally quit. His total out-of-pocket cost was $1.14. And if you're looking at off-grid camping setups, you don't even need the bulky car battery. You can order a roll of magnesium ribbon online for roughly $3. Take a strip of that, pair it up with some spare copper wire you already have lying around in your gear, and dunk them both into any natural saltwater source. Wire them in series to step up the voltage. 10 of these makeshift cells will pump out over 10 volts using nothing but raw metal and water. Splice in a cheap $2 USB regulator board, and you've just built a working smartphone charger in under 20 minutes. The whole rig weighs practically nothing in your backpack. This saltwater tech didn't just accidentally slip through the cracks of history. It was purposely discarded. It was locked away in classified government vaults, starved of academic funding, scrubbed from trade school textbooks paid for by corporate sponsors, and pushed out of retail stores where only highly profitable replacements are allowed to exist. But the laws of electrochemistry don't care about corporate profit margins. Saltwater pushes ions exactly the same way it did when fishermen off the coast of Portugal dunked metal into clay pots 4 centuries ago. Lead plates still retain massive amounts of unused potential, exactly like Howard Bellinger's Naval Research Group proved in 1963. Dissimilar metals reacting in conductive fluids still generate raw power, just like William Grove demonstrated in 1839. It takes a $120 billion a year machine to make you forget those three simple truths simultaneously. But today, you remembered all three. If this vault unlocked something in your mind today, hit subscribe and share this video. Every time you share this, you hand this suppressed knowledge to someone who is one day away from wasting their money throwing away a battery that isn't actually dead.